Now, we're fortunate that there have been a tremendous amount of technological advancements over the last few decades, especially in the field of biotech. But what if I told you that there were disorders and syndromes that were affecting 40% of the entire population, yet there have been little to no medical advancements made in over 30 years? You'd probably be asking yourself, why not? And why now? You're watching Mind Shifting Moments, a show that was created to help destigmatize the psychedelic industry through transparent conversation and by getting your big questions answered by experts that are hands on in the industry every day. I'm your host, Margaret Williamson, head of partnerships at Nucleus, a venture studio that's working to create brands that educate people, aggregate data, and activate customers inside the psychedelic industry. To help me answer today's big question, I have a wonderful guest who has a unique combination of skills and compounds that's working to fill this void. Please help me welcome Olivia Mannix. Hello, Olivia. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me today, Margaret.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to have you here specifically because of your unique position, not only in this sort of burgeoning field and huge opportunity that we have in front of us, but also just as someone who I won't give it all away. Why don't you give us a little bit of a little bit of your history and include as much as you want. If you wanted to stick professionally, great. Whatever you think is relevant to our listeners today.
Sure. So my background is just being an entrepreneur. I actually started one of the first ancillary cannabis companies in 2013 before adult use was legalized here in Colorado. I'm sure you can remember Amendment 64 and all the excitement around that. So I started a business to help companies in the space with their branding, marketing, PR, IR. Because there was really a need for branding, and the industry was just so new and was taboo in that sense. So that was really exciting to be working in a highly regulated space with not a lot of education or information around it. So I think it was just a normal pathway to go through to the psychedelic sector as well. So getting into that space, and in 2 years ago, I met my partner, Dr. Gigi Q, through a VC fund, and we decided to start a psychedelics company focused on women's health called Felicity Pharma.
Wonderful. It's so unique. I find so many parallels, I feel like, in your story that I tend to stick to the fringes of what's acceptable and what people deem appropriate. And so did you always find yourself in that? Like, I remember my professional career, I started in tobacco, right? Very taboo. Then moved and found myself in pharmaceuticals, and now just kind of always pushing the boundary. Is there something?
I love the challenge. I love being part of creating and paving the path for new industries, and just really thinking ahead and trend setting in those ways. So I think that's what we definitely have in common.
And it's so interesting because I love that both of our paths have brought us to psychedelics, because I think it's one of those compounds and those medicines that are sort of illegal or taboo for the wrong reasons. And I finally feel like, we're in a position where we can bring some true education, some true healing to people. And so, in your opinion, why do you think that is still this taboo scenario, and where do you see the intersection of psychedelics and women's health really happening?
Sure. So I think just historically, the taboo vernacular around psychedelics really was created with the Nixon administration, and just creating that fear and that chaos around psychedelics, and that they're satanic and awful and just all of these false claims. And people believed it, and people, still do. So we have to overcome a major challenge as an industry, as the public, as a whole, through legislative measures, through education, reform, advocacy, and really start to educate people on the benefits of psychedelic medicine. So fast forward today, there's been amazing traction made by some of the companies such as MAPS. They're in their phase 3 PTSD trials with MDMA. And they're really making great waves and really paving the way for all of us in this space. So now we're finding different niches to get into and just have a lot of literature and science that suggests that there's a lot of opportunity to really help people and really change behavioral and mental health, and also physical health for forever. So we're excited to see these changes.
Because, and that's what I kind of wanted the question to almost be today. What are female therapeutics? I think there's a lot of confusion around it because these are including things for, yes, it's categorized under mood disorders and chronic pain. But these are things that literally the statistics show that 80%, maybe some say 90% of women experience these symptoms on really a monthly basis, which is how I got to that math in the intro. That, if we're saying, hey, 80% of 50% of the population, that's 40% of everyone. And yes, that that everyone in this case happens to be all of our mothers and daughters and sisters.
Yeah, so there's actually been little to no innovation in women's health in the past 30 years. The only real drugs that have come out are your SSRIs, your antidepressants such as Paxil, and then also your birth controls, your oral contraceptives. So there's really been traditionally women have been, not used in clinical trials. So a lot of drugs that are on the market are usually trialed through men just because of women's hormonal and reproductive status. It's more difficult to run trials on women that are, in their menstrual phases, which is most women. So, we're really passionate about focusing on women and specifically hormonal mood disorders. So our first indication is called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, also known as PMDD. And this is a very severe psychotic method or portion of PMS, or type of PMS rather, where basically you have extreme highs and lows, anxiety, depression, physical pain. It affects up to 10% of women. And actually 30% of women that have this disorder may also attempt suicide, which is a horrible thing to think of. There's some approved drugs on the market. So again, your SSRIs, your antidepressants, and also Yaz, which is a birth control pill. And it's found that these medicines don't often work. And they also have negative side effects, such as sexual dysfunction. So a lot of times patients stop using them. So through some of the studies that we've been following and researching, we've found that potentially psychedelic medicine can have the great impact on this space and create solutions that are better than what we have now.
I mean, right. I mean, these things need solutions. So tell us, how do psychedelics actually address some of those problems? I don't know how deep you want to get into the science part of it, but, kind of giving us an overview is like, why will these psychedelic medicines be different than the SSRIs and the antidepressants and the IV drips that are out there right now?
Sure. So the psychedelics, basically, this could be like a multiple hour long conversation, but long story short, they have the ability to change the way that your brain thinks, overall. So the process of neuroplasticity. So basically the psychedelics change the components of your brain. So when you're a child, you have very neuroplastic brain cells, and basically you can learn things quickly, you can change behaviors quickly, when you're in that, molded state. So when you're taking the psychedelic and going through a PAP or PAT, a psychotherapy assisted therapy, then you're able to work with therapists, usually 2 at a time. You'd be taking a large dose of psilocybin is what we're working with, and you're able to really work through some of your traumas, your issues, and the way that you're experiencing this disorder. So basically the opportunity just to reprogram and to create neurogenesis, which is the restructure of new neurons.
Now, I know your company has been progressing towards, phase 2 trials and getting, to see the results. Have you guys been able to report any data on improvements of symptoms or success rates using this type of modality?
Not yet. We're hoping to get some traction here in the next few months, but it's been unfortunately the trial process is quite tedious and takes time. So we're still in the beginning stages there.
And so I kind of, wonder is that, we know, right, this FDA process can take up to a decade. And, what do we do in the meantime? Have you gotten any testimonies or case studies from women who maybe have done psilocybin or psychedelic assisted therapy and affected how that, what effect that might have had on like their PMDD or PMS syndrome?
Sure. Yeah. So we definitely have patients and people that are just advocates for PMDD awareness who've reached out saying that they've had positive experiences with psychedelics. Unfortunately, with what we're doing, it has to be much more scientific through the trials and just have the correct data points and such involved. So we can't really take someone's word for their experience when we're tying it into an FDA trial. And actually, we're hoping that since we're already going to be in phase 2A, that this trial will be, or the approval could be much quicker than more like in the 3-year range, is what we're hoping, especially with the advancements of MAPS and hoping that their drug will get approved, then it will make it a lot easier for us to advance.
Wonderful. And if everything were to go as according to plan and say, in 3 years, we've gone through trials, we've had those success rates, and I know that your kind of plan is that pipeline to big pharma. Do you feel like there'll be resistance in that pipeline? Are they accepting? Are people ready? Is this now the time where they're saying, yes, we need some solutions to women's health? Or it's still like,
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of advocates for changes in women's health, like all around. I think with big pharma, they're always looking for solutions and things, and being, pipeline or partnering with them eventually, I think would be a great opportunity because they have the resources, the bandwidth, what have you, to really get the word out. So we're more in the, partnering and playing in the same sandbox, if you will.
of course, yes. And what about for going for insurance? I attended a conference this past week and I had a real light bulb mind shifting moment, saying that, we think that big pharma really controls the market, but it's these giant insurance companies that are really, making some of the decisions. Have you found that to be the case as well? Are there any kind of partnerships? Do they seem open to wanting to help?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of groups of people that are making influences and working with insurance companies such as the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association, also known as APA. And they are basically going to be working with insurance companies. I think Enthea is another one that helps be that liaison. And I believe once these drugs are approved by the FDA, they're prescription drugs, then they will get insured, because it's really important to us for all patients to have access and affordability of these drugs.
And if, some of our listeners are saying, oh, goodness, a lot of these symptoms and disorders are something that I deal with on a regular basis, or if our listeners have someone at home that finds themselves suffering on a regular basis, are there any remedies or places that you would steer them? What advice could you give on ways to?
Yeah, great question. I would love to be able to help them right now, but unfortunately, we still have to go through the process to get prescription psychedelics created or developed. So I think just sticking with talk therapy, meeting with their psychologists and psychiatrists weekly, and just really getting the most support on that end is really important, and really understanding what their disorder is and how they can work through it.
Definitely. And from, using your skills that you honed in that cannabis market and really working to not only destigmatize, but also through the legalization process. And I know now on the psychedelic side, you're more honed in and focused on one company. But if you could step back and kind of put on those industry hat again, what would be your message? What do you think we should focus on when we're explaining to people and trying to help them, let go of those taboos?
Sure. Yeah. I think that definitely the psychedelic sector, I think, is really going in a positive direction, especially with creating ethical, efficacious drugs versus in the cannabis space. Unfortunately, it's more or less a lot of companies with brands, and it's basically just a consumer based industry versus the medical space, which is what I was originally the most passionate about. So I think just for psychedelic companies to really be in integrity, educate, advocate, and really inform the public and consumers about what these drugs are, because they're not just they can be very intense, and they if you have an ailment or have psychosis or are on SSRIs, you shouldn't be necessarily taking them, because there might be contraindications and things that could go wrong. So it's very important to be aware, to be educated before taking a psychedelic.
Well, are there ways that we can support Felicity Pharma and support you in this mission on the pathway? Is there ways to get involved with you guys?
Sure. So we're, always spreading the word about what we're up to. I think just people reaching out and just getting involved in terms of just sharing their thoughts or their stories, I think would be great. And then also on the fiscal end, we're always fundraising and looking for investors. So not only large institutions, but also angels and such. So if there are people that want to have a stake in this business and that are passionate about what we're doing, we'd love to hear from you.
Because, that's a good point. A lot of times we talk about the downsides of being this sort of unseen class of people, and that women are still viewed as minorities in the society. But what are the advantages of sort of having that classification? Have you come across any advantages that you could see?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of positivity and excitement of having a women-led. So the two founders of the company are myself and then my partner, who I believe I mentioned earlier, Dr. Gigi Koo. So I think it's great that there's women leadership for a women's health company, because a lot of women's health companies are ran by men. So I think that's huge and exciting. And it's also just opportunities to really create impactful solutions and just, again, trailblaze and pioneer, as we had mentioned earlier. And then we're really getting a lot of positive feedback and just encouragement from the communities, and especially the PMDD societies and communities as well.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's so true, that it's really, for those that like to be those pioneers, that this is really going to be a huge, huge market as it continues to develop. And, I think that's important for our listeners to understand that distinction that Olivia made, that she's a fully female founded company, but that does not mean that she doesn't have men sitting in decision-making positions or in the C-suite level. I was taking a look through your team, and it's a very diversified group of people.
Yeah. So we have, Dr. Gigi Koo, she is a Mount Sinai trained, over 25-year traumatic brain injury physician. She was responsible for actually developing the fibromyalgia patent over at Therapeutics, which is a public company. And then also our chief medical officer is Dr. Andrew Sach. He's in London, and he was part of GW Pharma, which it was responsible for creating the FDA-approved CBD drug Epidiolex, which helps with Dravet syndrome, which is a form of epilepsy. So him and then some of the other leaders on the team have experience with going through the FDA, have been in biotechs for dozens of years. So I really feel surrounded by really some power players, and I'm very privileged and blessed to be in this position.
Wonderful. Well, we're excited that you're sitting there, and we look forward as women, right? And just as a member of society, because I think that's what everybody, the mind shift that I want people to really take away is this isn't a woman's issue. It's not a woman's problem. But just imagine, even if in your own home, if the women that you are with didn't have to suffer from some of these, symptoms and maladies on a recurring basis, just how much better quality of life would be for, like you said, 40% of the entire population. So it's a people problem. And I'm glad that you're working to solve it. We thank you. And if you are listening and you are a part of the psychedelic industry, or you're curious about the psychedelic industry, make sure you visit us on withnucleus.com. You can explore your journey to well-being through our ecosystem. And if you're a brand looking to get your voice out there, or you have a unique idea inside the industry, we'd love to talk to you. So connect with us. And thank you again, Olivia. And I hope we shifted some minds. Feel free to leave in the comments or send me a message about any aha moments you might have had. And we'll see you guys next time.